This episode of Two Wheels, One Compass is a documentary on the politics of the Iron Range. If you've lived in the 21st century in the United States, you know how polarizing politics can be here. The very first thing I'm going to say on this episode is that this video is an attempt at political analysis. There may be comments that say that this is slanted on what I choose to show or what I'm leaving out. Just know that the goal of this video is to showcase the political climate of a region of Minnesota that I believe is one of the most unique in the country. Anyway, on an earlier episode on the Farmer Labor Party, I had mentioned that we were moving into a region of Minnesota that has been historically represented by the DFL, the left-wing Minnesotan party, since the Democratic and Farmer Labor parties had merged in the 40s after World War II. The Arrowhead region, the part of the state that I'm coming down and out of, has several sub-regions within. There's the large port city of Duluth, Minnesota's fourth largest city behind Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the plain city of Rochester. There's the North Shore, the backbone of which is Minnesota Highway 61, which runs along the rocky northern shore of Lake Superior all the way up until the Canadian border. That border is a crossing that I'll eventually take in Season 4. The Grand Portage Reservation resides at the tip of the Arrowhead, along the border. There's what I'd say is the real North Woods, the State National Forest, Voyageurs National Park, and the BWCA, the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. These borderland regions are very remote and also nicknamed the Yellowstone of Minnesota due to its pristine beauty and splendor. A lot of great remote hunting land is up here. You'll find the Bois Forte Reservation up here. This French name was based off the original Ojibwe name, Men of the Thick Woods. It's home to the best producers of wild rice in the US, and when you visit the North Woods, you'll be sure to find a lot of places to buy wild rice up here, most likely in small-town gas stations. Then peppered throughout this region is the legacy and current heart of the Iron Range. As shown in previous episodes on the origins of Eastern European settlement in the area, life here was fueled by either logging or mining. Many unions came out of the Progressive era, and the region has been known to be anti-big business and very pro-labor union. The Arrowhead region has been staunchly left-wing when it comes to their financial politics, and it's influenced the way the region has been represented at local, state, and national levels. Let's look at how. You can tell by these maps the Minnesota State Legislature representation. All these lawmakers go to St. Paul to represent their districts. For those who don't know, the color red is associated with the Conservative Party of Republicans, and blue is the color of the liberal DFL party. Here is the Minnesota State House, the lower chamber. Here's the representation in 2014, 2016, 2018, and 2020. And here's the State Senate, the upper chamber, in 2010, 2012, 2016, and 2020. You can see that the blue Democratic influence in the Arrowhead region isn't because of the more urban Duluth. There are rural districts represented by DFL representatives and senators. In 2020, however, 2 DFL senators left the DFL party to become independents. Recently, there's been a division between the labor and the environmentalist wings of the DFL. We'll get into that divide later. So how does the Arrowhead typically vote for president? When it comes to voting for president, Democratic presidential candidates have held the Arrowhead for almost 100 years. The last time the Arrowhead voted red was right before the Great Depression hit, and it's been blue ever since. All throughout the 20th century and into the current day, the Arrowhead has kept its blue hue even through major nationwide Republican landslide election years. The Arrowhead has just stayed Democratic. Because of this, when it comes to electoral college votes, the last time Minnesota voted for a Republican was 1972. It's the longest running blue state there is, voting Democratic in every one of the last 11 presidential terms. A lot of this is because of the Democratic turnout in the Arrowhead region and Iron Range. The Republican Party is trying to change this. Rural white voters are their key demographic, but somehow they haven't unlocked the North Woods for almost a century. After the 2016 election, the Republican Party saw their chance to turn the longest-running blue state red. They based it off of their results in the 2016 election, where Trump almost won Minnesota. So let's have a look at that. Here are 3 presidential elections and their turnout in Minnesota. You can see that Obama won against McCain and Romney by pretty wide margins. In 2016, though, Hillary Clinton narrowly beat Trump, but not by much. This excited the Republican Party. If they targeted their key demographic and focused on the North Woods, they believed that they could flip Minnesota red. If you look closely, this is not by percentage, but by actual votes. Republican turnout from 2012 to 2016 was about the same, but Democratic turnout dropped significantly. It's been said, arguably, that Trump didn't almost win Minnesota, it's that Hillary almost lost it. In an effort to turn the Arrowhead Republican, Trump focused heavily on the North Woods. After the 2018 midterms, Trump and his campaign surrogates visited the region several times, in addition to other parts of the state, where the president visited Duluth twice and Bemidji once. Ivanka and Don Jr. visited Duluth once each, and Vice President Pence visited Hibbing. The North Woods was right in the Republican Party's focus. Trends in Minnesota don't seem to be much different from the rest of the country, where Republicans hold rural voters while Democrats hold urban areas, while they're currently surging in the suburbs. The rural nature of the North Woods has seemed to follow that trend, but slower than other regions of the U.S. Here is a map of all of Minnesota's precincts. Each one of these little divisions, that's a precinct. It's the most accurate, local, raw data that we have on voter persuasion. Campaigns may not know how you vote door to door, but this precinct data gives a good snapshot of a neighborhood or a township's voting patterns. Everybody in a precinct also tends to vote at the same place in Minnesota. The smaller the precinct, the more people live there and the closer people live together. We'll play this forward in time, starting in 2008 going to 2020. Note the shift in rural areas, including the Iron Range. Ready? Here we go. So, here's the voter turnout in 2008, 2012, 2016, and 2020. We'll play it again, but note the suburban areas in the Twin Cities inset here too. So this is Obama's win in 2008 and 2012, and Trump's win in 2016, and Biden in 2020. You can really see the urban, suburban, and rural divide in Minnesota, with the Arrowhead turning more red. It's hard to believe now, but Democrats used to dominate rural areas in the Midwest. In my quick documentary on the Farmer Labor Party a few episodes back, I talked about how the farmers of the party fought for farm subsidies, or government payments that would keep farmers afloat in bad years. We talked about farming as an industry with very little control, where fluctuations in markets, weather, and railroad prices can hurt farmers and their families. Government is a vehicle for farmers to fight back, and it's paid off. If you know anything about civilizations, keeping your food supply stable is a huge part of keeping your country going. Both major parties favor farm subsidies nowadays, not just Democrats. Republican politicians also vote in favor of these payments to farmers, but that wasn't the case in the early 20th century, as they saw it as socialist and unfavorable. We also discussed the voting patterns of rural areas in my 3-part series on the Nonpartisan League. The League was a political movement that took North Dakota, a very rural state, through a political revolution right after World War I. After World War II, the greatest generation, the men and women that fought and lived through the war, voted Democrat overwhelmingly, especially in rural parts of the Midwest and Minnesota. A huge, bolstered middle class saw immense growth across the country, and members of the greatest generation would end up voting Democrat for the rest of their lives. Going into the 21st century, especially seen around Obama's first election, the greatest generation began to die off of old age. Rural areas now are mostly populated by older, white Christian voters. They are of the baby boomer and silent generations that vote Republican based on their values regarding abortion, firearms, and immigration, to name a couple issues. The passage of time, lifelong voting patterns, and whatever issues are seen as the biggest of the day have caused this shift. The range has turned a hue of red in 2020, and one strategy the Republican Party has employed is to tout the copper-nickel sulfide mining projects that have been a huge controversy in Minnesota. The GOP says that lawmakers or regulators that keep these mining companies from breaking ground on the range are keeping vital jobs from the region. So let's talk about this because it's important. The Republican Party isn't just saying this. Mining jobs in the Iron Range have been in decline for a while. Over the last few generations, new technologies that cut down on labor costs have eliminated the need for many workers. Also, the stocks of pure iron ore are all but depleted. As we say in Minnesota, the range mined the iron ore that built the tanks and planes that liberated Europe. All that iron is nearly gone. Today, taconite is mined, which requires a refining process to turn it into steel. The stock of iron metals in the range will deplete one day. Minnesota knew this. In 1941, Minnesota created the IRRB, or the Iron Range Resource and Rehabilitation Board. It's a department like any other, like the Department of Transportation or the Minnesota Department of Health. The governor appoints a cabinet member or the commissioner of this board that's literally only for economic development in the range area. So, the responsibility of the IRRB is to take taxes from mining companies and put them right back into the communities that helped extract their metals to get ready for a post-mining range. Mining jobs won't be around forever, so funds allocated from mining companies go directly to the board to help with collaborations between Iron Range businesses, strengthening worker education, granting business loans, and fostering innovation in the region. So back to the divide again. The Republican Party is appealing to the labor unions that make up the DFL coalition in the region by talking jobs. However, environmentalist voters are stating that the benefits of these copper-nickel sulfide mines are not worth the cost. Many of these environmental voters are in the Arrowhead region of Minnesota, but a huge critique is that they're also coming from metro voters who are overpowering the local population up north with representation that's keeping these copper-nickel sulfide mining projects from happening. Iron Rangers feel like metro voters are making their decisions for them from hundreds of miles away. But it's not just the metro. Surveys show that a little over 2/3 of Minnesotans are opposed to the copper-nickel sulfide mines, meaning there are Republicans opposed to them as well. So why are these projects so controversial? The big reason is Minnesota has never had mines like these before, and their location and mining style put the local ecotourism economy at risk. The Polymet and Twin Metals projects would bring jobs to the Ely area. Here's where the mines would be located, with the land highlighted in orange in serious risk of contamination. Here's the direction of the water flow going directly into the Boundary Waters Canoe Wilderness area. It's for this reason that environmentalist groups are all over this. The Vermilion Range around Ely has been inactive since 1964 and hasn't had any mining operations for about 4 or 5 generations. Ely now boasts a steady biotourism economy due to its proximity to the Boundary Waters, Voyageurs National Park, and the National Forest land in its orbit. There's a lot of hiking, camping, hunting, fishing, snowmobiling, ATV riding, and seasonal cabin and resort industries here. The proposed mines would be put upstream from these ecotourism hotspots, and if they were to leak, it would put toxic chemicals into the Boundary Waters, which is right in the crosshairs of the projects. So let's look at the job numbers reported by Twin Metals. They would bring 427 permanent jobs. Ely, by comparison, has 4,490 permanent jobs that rely on the economic activity brought by today's ecotourism. As long as the Boundary Waters aren't polluted, the Ely economy will have a steady stream of income. If the mines are approved and the Boundary Waters are contaminated, the mines will only bring hundreds of temporary high-paying jobs, hurting the local economic prospects of thousands of others that don't pay as much as mining. A huge criticism of the copper-nickel sulfide mines is that they're typically done in deserts, such as Nevada or the Atacama Desert of Chile, where the Twin Metals Mining Company is headquartered. Putting a mine of this type in Minnesota's boreal forest with regular rainfall puts more wildlife at risk to leaks that could happen more commonly. But how common are the leaks? A study conducted on U.S. mines showed that mines that were predicted to have low impacts on surface and groundwater, at least 70% of those mines violated water quality standards, releasing toxic metals into the environment around them. On another study of Alaska's 5 major mines, all 5 had major spills and accidental releases. I'll link to these studies in the description. In addition, the companies that would break ground on the range have a history of accidents, including one major one that's arguably the worst mining disaster in Brazil's history. The Brazilian Mines Dam that was supposed to hold mining waste of toxic chemicals broke, and Polymet was going to use that same style of dam in the Boundary Waters. That raised a lot of eyebrows with regulators, delaying the project and serving as a rallying cry against the mines among conservationists. Looking at the Minnesota Republican Party's website, They say that proper stewardship of our natural resources and agricultural lands is best achieved through sound science and adherence to constitutionally guaranteed property rights. So here's the divide. The Republican Party says this is about mining jobs, and the DFL says those mining jobs will be at the expense of jobs supported by the income of the biotourism industry. There is a real criticism there that the people of the range will have to contend with when they vote for one party or the other. So if you remember in an earlier graphic, there are two Arrowhead Region state senators who defected from the DFL to become independents. In the 2020 elections, then Senate Majority Leader Senator Bach and Senator Tomassoni actually won their races with comfortable margins against their Republican opponents. Senator Bach was the leader of the Senate DFL from 2010 until right after the 2020 election. After the Republican Party held onto their majority by one seat, Susan Kent from Woodbury challenged him for his leadership seat, and after a vote, she had won enough votes to become the head of the DFL in the state Senate. Bach defected from the party along with State Senator Tomassoni and created their own independent caucus. State Senator Bach said it was for aligning more with moderate than the far right or left. Why did they do this? The two state senators could have left the DFL because of political infighting over DFL Senate leadership positions, disagreements over issues, or Bach could have done it out of revenge to hurt the party for voting him out as leader. Or it's a combination of any of them. Regardless, the two state senators have still vowed to represent their constituents and fight for the natural resource-based economy that is critical to their region of the state. There are major disagreements over what the fiscal policy of the Northwoods should be, even among DFLers in the Arrowhead. All 6 House districts are still represented by DFLers. So what solutions are there for the people of the range? If the mining jobs decline, so will the economic activity in the range. It could further fall into a state of urban decay as higher-paying mining jobs will leave and people will move elsewhere. I made a video on the rural exodus named Slowing Pains. In this episode, I go into the reasons why the U.S. has had its rural regions in decay and the measures that are being taken to turn the tide. The Iron Range has been an exception to rural flight thanks to mining, but it will eventually run out in the next couple generations, so there's never been a better time to work toward a post-mining economy on the range. How do we grow the range economy without mining and keep the biotourism industry? So if we were to entertain the idea of a post-mining range in order to preserve the long-term moneymaker of the Northwoods, how would that happen? What are some solutions? The progressive wing of the National Democratic Party claims to have a plan for regions such as these and other mining economies that are in decline, such as Kentucky and West Virginia. You can see by this map of unemployment in March 2020, just as the pandemic was spreading in the US, regions such as coal mining Appalachia are in extreme decline. The progressive wing of the Democratic Party has proposed a major socioeconomic overhaul, much like the New Deal in the Great Depression, the Green New Deal. The plan's jobs section is meant to tackle regions such as these, like the Iron Range, and the goal of the investment is to have it pay for itself through the growth it creates. The plan of the Green New Deal would be a massive government effort in investing in green energy such as wind turbines, batteries, solar panels, and their manufacturing and infrastructure. The labor sector of the Iron Range is already vocationally equipped for these industries. Workers that make a living in these trades are already here. The means of shipping products such as wind turbines, batteries, and solar panels out of the range are already built. There would need to be some overhaul, but the port city of Duluth can handle the shipping, and the railroads are all but ready to ship products instead of materials. So one solution is to overhaul the economy with government incentives for private investment in different industries, much like the Green New Deal. The pandemic has also showed that white-collar jobs such as those in IT can be worked by telecommuting from anywhere, and many may favor the busy night sky in the country over the busy nightlife in the city. Property values are more attractive and people could build bigger homes on less expensive land. A second solution is to get rural broadband access to this region. Major infrastructure projects have been pushed to get high-speed internet access into rural areas, and this can attract telecommuters. White-collar workers are typically paid higher wages than the service industry and blue-collar workers, and they can stimulate the local economy through spending. Incentivizing not businesses, but high-paying white-collar workers to move into rural areas is not a new concept. There are cities around the US that are giving attractive tax cuts or even cash payments to people moving into their communities. These small towns see these higher paid workers as investments. Some towns will give you land for free if you build a house on it. Some towns will cover thousands of dollars in relocation costs, stipends for housing, or straight up universal basic income where you're given a wage just to live there. Alaska has been doing this since the 1970s. A third solution would be worker relocation incentives. Also, there are projects that are attempting to attract other kinds of tourism. The Iron Range town of Virginia, for example, is building a huge convention center that will serve as a meeting place and a hockey mecca, perfect for a region that produces some of the world's most successful hockey players. Facilitating huge hockey tournaments in a region of the world where hockey is king can turn into a huge source of tax revenue and jobs every winter for the city of Virginia. The small town of Sturgis, South Dakota, for example, hosts a nationwide rally for motorcyclists, bringing in millions in revenue. The Iron Range could aim to be the same for hockey. A fourth solution would be investment in large-scale attractions that bring about permanent or seasonal income from elsewhere. So where have we seen these solutions work before? In conclusion to solutions, one can look no farther than the Gulf nation of the United Arab Emirates, which has the young city of Dubai. It's the perfect example of people thinking of the economy of the future. Much like the Iron Range, they too have a finite amount of a non-renewable resource, oil. They've used their riches to work toward building an economy that will survive peak oil by investing in opportunities to attract tourism. Of course, this is on a much larger scale than rural northern Minnesota, but the concept's the same. They're both economies based on finite resources, and they're looking toward the future. So that about wraps this up. I worked really hard on this episode, so much so that it's turned into a mini documentary. This episode was already completed, and I actually took it down, updated it, and redid the whole thing while adding new chapters and extending it about 15 minutes. Minnesota's Arrowhead is its own region of the US that has its unique challenges and an uncertain future. The people that are born and move to the Arrowhead, and Minnesotans at large, will have extremely consequential elections every 2 years that will steer this region into the unknown horizon. I'm now coming down and out of the range south of Duluth to cross over into the 9th and final state of Season 3, Wisconsin. A friend is having a bachelor party on the other side of the border, and what's scary is I almost didn't make it. The next episode coming up is the Season 3 finale. You've made it this far, so feel free to stick around for a few more seconds to see some related videos I've referenced in this episode. Thanks for watching 2 Wheels, 1 Compass.